Hey, I want to let you all know that Stephanie Mayer is joining me this morning during this time of teaching. So I'll do some teaching, and Stephanie will do some painting, and we'll see what she comes up with by the end. And I think it's going to be good. Thank you, Stephanie, for being here. So this morning I want to talk about the parable of the mustard seed, which Jesus says ultimately this seed grows into a tree. But before we get there, I want to talk about a different kind of tree for just a moment. It's this tree called the cedar of Lebanon. And there's this book in the Old Testament or the Hebrew Bible, and it's called Ezekiel. Ezekiel is a prophet, and he writes about the cedar of Lebanon. And here's how the story goes down. God comes to Ezekiel and says, "My man, I need you to go to Pharaoh in Egypt. And I need you to let him know that I know that he thinks he's the man. He's the big dog on the porch. But he needs to know that it's all going to be cut down. He thinks he's creating some great tree here. He thinks what he's doing is great, but it's all going to be cut down just like Assyria was cut down." So Ezekiel goes to Pharaoh in Egypt, and he proclaims this message. And I want you to overhear this language, this imagery of the tree he talks about, the cedar of Lebanon. So I'm in chapter 31 of Ezekiel, and I'm just picking some verses here. Beautiful branches. What's a cedar of Lebanon? Beautiful branches, dense shade, towering height. Indeed, its top went up between the clouds. Waters nourished it, and in its shade every great nation lived. It became beautiful in its greatness. No cedar was equal in God's garden. Here's a cedar of Lebanon. It kind of reflects what we just read, right? This huge, towering tree. Branches that go out, providing dense shade. The tree is like a tower going all the way up in between the clouds. Now, here's what's fascinating about this. Israel longed to be like the cedar of Lebanon. They were the ones suffering, but they wanted to be the ones who were thriving. They wanted to be the big thing. They wanted to be nourished by God's waters and nurtured by these waters. And they wanted to turn around and do the nourishing and the nurturing. Why is this significant? Fast forward with me just a few centuries to the 1st century. You have this 1st century Jewish sage and rabbi who comes along. And by this time in Matthew chapter 13, he has a bit of a following. He gets crowds to gather in. The religious leaders, they're interested in what this man is saying. Disciples have given their lives to follow the teachings of this rabbi. And in chapter 13, we have the parable of the mustard seed. And I can imagine during this story, Jesus saying to his disciples, "Come on now, y'all need to gather in. Because I'm about to tell you who you are. I'm about to give you your mission statement. I'm about to tell you what your work is like in this world." And so he gathers them in, and I think he probably has them sit down. And you can imagine they're excited. Their beloved leader is about to tell them who they are. And Jesus starts talking about a seed and a tree. Now keep in mind, these Old Testament prophets, they are their people. They would have been intimately familiar with these prophets. Many of them could have recited the words of Ezekiel. So when Jesus starts talking about a tree, oh yeah, baby, we're going to be the cedar of Lebanon. Here's the parable Jesus drops. He told another parable to them. The kingdom of heaven is like a mustard seed that someone took and planted in his field. It's the smallest of all seeds, but when it's grown, it's the largest of all vegetable plants. It becomes a tree so that the birds in the sky come and nest in its branches. Here's a mustard bush. Not quite as spectacular, is it? Not quite as pretty. It's kind of messy. In fact, that's a big mustard tree. Most mustard trees only grow to be 4 to 6 feet high. I mean, can you imagine? Can you imagine you're one of the disciples sitting on the edge of your seat because you're about to be told who you are and what your work is about in the world? And Jesus says, yeah, check it out. You're going to be like this. You're going to be like a mustard tree. What? I mean, come on, Jesus. We don't want to be a shrub. We don't want to be a bush. We want to be that great cedar of Lebanon. But in this parable, Jesus says that's not what the kingdom of God is like. It's different. And parables always turn things upside down. But trees start somewhere. So let's talk for just a moment about seeds. You see, in the ancient world, so many of the metaphors for spiritual life were metaphors around agriculture because they were people of agriculture. So when you read through the scriptures, you see lots of metaphors around planting and harvesting and seeds. And now for the ancient people, they knew that for something to grow, a seed had to be planted. How is a seed planted? It's buried deep into the earth, goes beneath the soil, and you don't see anything happening for a while. All you know is that a seed has been planted. And so think with me for a moment about the ancient world. They knew that they had to do their part. They had to do their work. They had to cultivate the soil around the seed. They had to prepare things. They had to control the conditions as much as they could control the conditions. But see, they also knew that God had to do God's part too. That they had to work together. You see, for them, someone, somewhere, usually somewhere up there, someone had to provide things like rain. But not too much rain where everything would wash away, but just enough rain. Something had to provide things like sunlight. But not too much sunlight where everything would dry out, but enough sunlight. You see, it was about the active work together. But it was also about the waiting and the hoping and the patience. And so by the time we get to this parable, Jesus is picking up on this image when it comes to things like the soul, who they are as people in the world. You see, your life is like a seed planted in the ground. And you know, we have to remember, we are children of the modern era, right? I mean, this is the world we were born into. It's the world in which we were raised. Not by our own choices, it's just the world we were born into. And so think about the last few hundred years or so. You had the invention of the machine. And what did the invention of the machine give us? You see, the birth of the machine gave us the idea of instantaneous results. All you have to do is pull a lever, push a button, flip a switch, and something happens. Now, interestingly enough, during the time of the birth of the machine, you had religious leaders start talking about this thing called this instantaneous spiritual conversion. How did that play itself out? Well, all you have to do is come up to the altar and ask Jesus into your heart. Voila, you have connection with God. All you have to do is follow these 4 simple steps, and you have connection with God. All you have to do is, I mean, we are a culture that is obsessed with instant results. Is it true? In 30 days, you can have the perfect body. In 60 days, your mind and heart can be completely renewed. In 90 days, every bathroom in your house can be remodeled. I mean, we are obsessed with instant results. And you see, unlike our ancestors, many of us do not understand things like waiting and hoping and patience and relying on God when it comes to things like our soul, our life, the deepest things we know. Your life is like a seed planted in the ground. You know, early in my recovery with alcohol addiction, I remember saying to a buddy of mine, I said, man, I just don't get it. See, I go into these rooms and I go into these meetings and it's like everyone around me, they have this weird kind of joy. And they're going through some things, but they have this peace, this deep kind of peace. And I don't know, maybe it's just not for me. Maybe there's a different way to do it. Maybe I go back to the old way. And I'll never forget, he just stops and looks at me. And he says, how long has it been? I said, dude, I have been at it every day for 3 weeks. And he just smiled. And don't you hate it when people smile sometimes? Oh, he just smiled because you know he's about ready to drop a wisdom bomb. And he says, you have to keep going. It's right here, but you have to keep going. Your life is like a seed planted in the ground. I was just talking to a guy this week, and he was telling me that he had decided that he was going to finally face his issues of anger. That for all his life, he's had these anger issues. And he even tells me by his own admission that when he gets angry, it's really scary. Like people around him get scared. You want to stay out of his way because when he's angry, he's angry. It's scary. And so he's calling me, and he's really frustrated. I mean, this guy's deeply frustrated. And he says, Ryan, nothing is working, man. I have prayed about this. I have tried to turn this thing over to God. Nothing is working. He said, even today, I've been awake for 45 minutes. I've already been at it with my wife, and now she's mad at me. And then I get in the car to go to work. I'm in traffic, and I'm flipping people off. I'm cussing people out. Nothing is working. And so I get to ask the question, so how long have you been at it? How long has it been since you decided to confront and face your issues of anger? Dude, I've been at it for 30 days. Okay, so let me get this right. You, by your own admission, tell me that for the past 37 years of your life, this is how you responded in the world with anger. People were even, your own family members were scared of you. And you want it to be gone in 30 days? Dude, come on. You have to keep going. It's right here, but you have to keep going. Your life is like a seed. You have to keep doing the work. You have to keep cultivating the soil. Keep cultivating the thing that has been planted in you. And at some point, you have to have wisdom enough to let that thing go and actually trust that God is doing something in you, through you, among you, and all around you. Oh, come on, God. Man, don't you want me to be the new thing? Come on, I don't want to be a seed. I want to be that great cedar of Lebanon. And I want it to happen today. Man, this is your soul we're talking about here. This is your life. And your life is like a seed planted in the ground. And I know many of you are on a journey, a new kind of journey, a journey you didn't think you'd ever be on. A journey of loss, a journey of going through divorce, a journey of forgiveness, a journey of some sort of transition, a journey of church. Some of you are here today because you've decided to give faith another chance, because you realized you needed something bigger, something more in your life. And you're here this morning, even though the church, the institutionalized church, institutional religion, even though it's burned you, you're here. And my brothers and sisters, don't buy into the temptation. Don't give in to the temptation of demanding instant results. It's not the way the soul works. It's not the way your life works. Keep going. Don't buy into the temptation. Keep doing the work. Keep cultivating the soil, the seed that has been planted. And as you do that, give yourself to things like patience and waiting and hoping and trusting that God is working in and through and among you. You see, a seed goes deep into the ground, and you don't see anything happening for a while. And the temptation is to give up. Go back to an old way. Throw your hands in the air, but keep going, because there will be moments on your journey, whatever journey that is, there will be moments where you stop and look back at your life, where you do some reflection, you take some inventory, and you will start to see things. And you might even get on your knees a little bit, and you'll see something coming up out of the ground, and you'll say to yourself, what in the heck is that? Oh my goodness, is it a sprout? Is something coming out of the ground? I didn't think this was possible. How did I get here? You see, hold on to those moments, because it is not about arrival. You will never arrive. In fact, categories of arrival are boring. If you have arrived, you have stopped growing, and that is a boring story. Keep going, because it's right here. And by the way, you may never become that great cedar of Lebanon. But at some point, as Sam was alluding to earlier, we have to have enough courage to ask the questions about who we want to be in this world, about the people we're called to be in this world. You know, I know a lady, she and her husband, they long to live this different kind of life in the world. They were tired of participating in that rat race of making more money to buy more things and having more things, so you got to pay more bills, you got to make more money. Now, they have 3 little kids, a 9-year-old boy and 2 6-year-old twin girls. And they decided to leave it all behind a few years ago. They sold most of their belongings to pursue what they call a simpler, experience-based life. And she's a blogger, and in her blog she talks about the struggles and the challenges that come with this transition. The struggles of going from a big house to a little 2-bedroom condo. The struggles of having many things to having few things. And I was talking to her on Friday morning, because this lady is my sister. And I was talking to her on Friday morning, and she said, Ryan, it's weird. She says, if someone would have come along to me 5 years ago and said that soon we'd be on this new journey, we would sell everything that we have, and we would be living off 1/5 of the income that we currently have. If someone said that to me, I'd say they're crazy. And if they came to me and said, oh, and by the way, on this journey, you're going to be happy, I'd call them even crazier. But she said, it's weird. Because now, here we are doing new things. And sometimes we get really scared because we don't know what's next. But she said, we actually have joy. For the first time in my life, she says, I feel alive. Like I'm living the path God has called me to live on. God has called me to be on. More joy, less stuff. More life, less certainty. More journey, less arrival. This is what the kingdom of God looks like. It's not like that great cedar of Lebanon, but it's like a mustard tree. Parables always turn things upside down. And let me end with just a word on mustard trees. You see their roots? They spread far out, just beneath the soil. But the thing about mustard trees is they have these really deep roots that go deep into the ground also. And so I don't know, maybe that's what Jesus was talking about when he starts talking about a mustard tree. The depth of the connection into the soil in which it's placed. I mean, do you get that? the depth of the connection into the soil in which you are placed. And perhaps Jesus was speaking with a tremendous amount of clarity here. It is not about growing bigger and bigger, but it is about having roots that extend farther out and go deeper. You see, mustard trees, they have these deep, tangly, connected roots, and they spread out. And they were considered invasive and persistent and hard to get rid of. And apparently, if you were to uproot a mustard tree, because of its root system, if you were to uproot it, it would leave a huge gaping hole in the ground. And that's an interesting image, isn't it? So the kingdom of God is like a seed that grows into a mustard tree. Is Jesus saying to his disciples, the work you are giving your life to is messy, and it's tangly, and it is involved in people's lives, and it is so deeply rooted in the things that matter. My friends, is the image of the mustard tree still relevant today? Would Jesus have the same message for us? Do you know last summer, the U.S. Surgeon General was interviewed. And in this interview, he was asked, what's the greatest public health crisis of our day? And you know what he said? He said, the greatest public health crisis of our day isn't heart disease. It's not diabetes. It's not even cancer. The greatest public health crisis of our day is isolation and social disconnection. And that's stunning, isn't it? Be reminded this morning, the person you're sitting next to, they may be in battle with feelings and realities of isolation and disconnection. And when you leave this church building, when you leave this parking lot and you interact with people in this community, be reminded they may be in battle with feelings and realities of isolation and being disconnected from everything meaningful. And it raises the question for us, doesn't it? What are we rooted in? What are we so deeply rooted in? And is it messy? Is it tangly? Is it involved in people's lives? I mean, maybe a better way to think of this question is I asked you, St. Luke's congregation, St. Luke's people, if we were to somehow be uprooted out of this community, would there be a huge gaping hole? You see, our life together, it's like a seed planted into the ground. And what we do with it matters. And we have to keep going. We have to keep going because the kingdom of God is right here.